Ang ating pamahalaan ay dapat pahalagahan at ang mga nanunungkulan ay dapat ding sundan.
Footprints that we lead them to believe, and the lives we live inspire them to obey. Oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful.
Blessed day to all. Welcome to our 5MD or 5 Minutes Devotion. This is Pastor Paul, and for today's lesson we'll be talking about the power of God and submission to the government. The power of God and submission to the government. The Bible says in the book of Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 4, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil." This is the Bible's teaching about the power of God and the submission to the government. If we will just realize that everything is authored by God, including our government, its power, its mandate, we will be obedient to God, and we will be law-abiding citizen. We will not be the lawbreakers. One of the distinct characteristics of a genuine Christian, he is obedient to the law of God, and he also submit to the law of the nations, the law of the country. Not just that, he knows that even those who are in power were placed by God Himself, and they have purposes why they are there. Below are the points to understand the power of God and the authority of our government. Number 1, omnipotence of God. Omnipotence of God. God, being the all-powerful one, is the source of all power. All powers came from Him, and even the power of the government and the power, authority of those who sits on those positions in the government came from Him. And by knowing that, we must submit to God Himself, and we must submit to the authority He vested in our governments, because there is no power but from God. Number 2, ordinance of God. Ordinance of God. If we resist the power of those who are in authority, we are resisting the ordinance of God, because it is God who gave those people, those in power, for us to be in order. That's why ordinance, that is the order of God. And failing to obey and resist that order, we will receive damnation as the consequence. And number 3, official from God. Official from God. The purposes of the rulers or the officials in our governments are not to make the good doers afraid, but those who are doing evil, they must be afraid. And those who are doing good will receive the praise of the law, will receive the praise of the same. And number 4, lastly, ordained of God. Ordained of God. God called the rulers in the government. God placed them as His minister to do His will in certain nation. They are placed and commissioned by God to make the evildoers afraid, and because they are not there for nothing. They are the avenger of God. They are the one to execute the judgment of God for doing the evil things. What a great picture of a good government. If we will come back to the original will of God, to the government, and the rulers will be obedient to their mandates from God, and we will submit to God and to the order of the government, we will have a peaceful and beautiful life. Christians, let us honor God by obeying His law, by submitting to our government, by being a good believer, an example as a law-abiding citizens. Thank you very much. Jesus saves, and to God be the glory.